So welcome to everybody. This part is on the console part of the project. So we're going to create a command line interpreter tool so that we can interact with our application through some custom commands. Without further ado, we're going to create a file named console.py in accordance to the project. And also there are some other classes we need to know about, like the CMD class from the CMD library. Let's create a file, console.py. And I'm going to add the headers, the shebang, and Python 3. Then for the console application, let's call it something application console. So you can name it with the name you want. Also, this class is going to inherit from the CMD class. Import CMD. So what is the CMD library? According to the Python documentation I'm reading, the CMD class provides a simple framework for writing line-oriented command interpreters. So these are often useful for test harnesses, administrative tools, and so on. So the first step is to inherit from the CMD class. Then we are going to add some methods which are going to be called whenever we want to interact with our application. And next, there are some other setups we need to do. The console will start when you try to execute the console file. So if the module is being executed, then we start the console. I'm going to make the name a bit shorter. So app console dot command loop. So this method will start the console and repeatedly ask the user to enter something on the command line. Next, we have to add some other method. For example, I'm going to first open the terminal before we start. Then make the file executable, console.py, and console.py. It says missing one required positional argument. True. In order to start the console, we first need to create an instance of it. Forgot to add the parentheses. So we create an instance of this command, of this console. Then we start the loop, which repeatedly prompt the user to enter commands. Now let's start the console. It says missing one required positional argument. So I'm going to look into the documentation. Just a few seconds. I guess we forgot something. So according to the doc, yes, the file wasn't saved. So I'm gonna save the file, then run it again. So you see that we have this prompt when you start the console, and thanks to the loops in the CMD loop call, the user need to enter his command. So we are going to define some custom commands our console can execute. For now, you can type in something like that. There is no command we configured yet, but we're going to add one. So to add a command to your command line interpreter, you define the function, then you prefix the name of the function with do underscore, then the name of the command. For example, you can say do underscore greet, and each of these functions receive one mandatory positional argument. The mandatory positional arguments are the arguments that these greet command will receive. For example, you can say hello world. And let's go back in the console. I'm going to close that. Then when you start the console, then you type in greet. This method will be called. And you see that it displays greet. And also you can pass some arguments to your command. For example, you can type in greet, then your name. For example, Ali. For now, we are not handling the parameters, but I'm going to change the print function call. So you can type in hello, then the name. So that would be former org. I'm going to close that. Then when you type greet Ali, it will say hello Ali, because the parameter we pass to the command is being used to call this do underscore greet method. So this is the basics. Sometimes there are other special functions. Um, for example, the help commands and other custom functions you can add on your console class. I'm going to close that. So how do we interact with the rest of the application? For example, how to create users models, state models from the command, the custom command. So I'm going to open the project requirements, then start with the first command they ask for. Just give a few seconds, it's loading. Yes, the network is kind of slow. So they ask to write a function, a command that when you type in help, it will display some help. So you can type do help, then self, then the org, then you can print some help. For example, this is a command line tool. So when you start your command like that, so you can type in help and it displays this is a command line tool. But sometimes you want to document your method. For example, the greet command, you want to add some helps documentation. For example, you might want to type in help greet. So this can be done by adding some other special functions. For example, you type in help underscore greet. So whenever the user type in help greet, this function will be called. Then what we're gonna do is to display the helps for this greet command. So I'm gonna type in greet a greet a user knowing the name. So I'm going to close the command prompt in the terminal and then we start the console again. Now let's type in help greet. So we have a problem because we defined this default function and we are going to delete it. And let's close that and start the command line tool help greet. So it says help greet missing one required positional argument. So which means we needed to add some other required positional argument. Um, let's look in the documentation what they are saying. I'm going to share the screen. And for the helps, where is that? Just a few seconds. Okay, and where can we where could we find that? So in a few, great. So let's go back in the code. I'm going to do some small search, just a few seconds. So here, when you type in the help for a command, we do not need to pass in, um, sorry for that. Okay, we don't need to specify a second required positional argument. So I'm going to delete this arg thing. So now when you start your command, your console, you can type in help greet. It says greet a user knowing the name. So you can add your commands, then the helps for those commands, like the way we just showed. Let's move on. This is the basics. Now let's move on other steps. So the next step after typing the helps, all those things, these are, I can say, the easy part. Now, the next task says, for the console, we should be adding a create command, a show command, also some other command like the destroy command and all command, updates command, all those different commands. So the first command we are going to add will be the create command. Let's add this. I'm going to delete all those. So according to the project requirements, the create commands create a base model instance, save it in the file storage, then print the ID. So we're going to type in the command name do create, then we pass in an arg. Then after that, we are going to try to create the base model. So what will happen is instance equal base model. But beforehand, we need to import the base model. So from models, base model, import model, import base model. Then now we can create an instance of the base model. Then we take that instance, then we save it. Once we save the instance, we can now print its ID. So I'm just going to rename instance to something like object. And how do we create a model? So in order to create the model, we have to pass in the args. For example, when you type in create in the terminal, create base model, then the create base model, the base model string will be passed to the do create function. So we have to check the value in the args before creating the model. One way of doing that would be to say if arg equal base model. Then we can save the model. You can create a model, then save it. So whatever the object would be, maybe we are going to add some other capabilities. For example, creating a user or a state model. So I'm going to import the other models. So models, from models, user, import user, and from models, state, import state. And that would give us something like that. So if arg equal base model, we create an instance of base model. Else, if arg equal user, then we create an instance of user. Else if org equal state, then we create an instance of state. So that is one way of doing that. Then we can call the save method on those objects. But for now, I'm going to define the object variable. There is another case we need to take into account. What if the model does not exist? So there should be an if statement to check if object is not known. So if the object isn't known, that means the model has been created, then we can print its ID. Else, we are going to show an error message. Print something like class name does not exist or doesn't exist. So that is for the create method, the create command. Now let's go back and run the console. I'm going to quit the console and start it again, console. Sorry, they say the new missing one required positional argument. There seems to be some bugs on the in the previous project. I'm going to check that. So it is from the reload method. Yes, the bug was due to here. We are going to change that to something else. File storage underscore underscore object and object ID equal object. So let's close that and open the terminal again. Now let's start the command again, console. Then when you type in the command create with no argument, it will say class name does not exist. But when you type in the name of a class, create, for example, base model, then it creates an instance of the base model because we have this if statement. Then it prints the instance. So this is what we are seeing here. Now there are other commands. The all command to display all object from the file storage. So what we're going to add would be the do all command. Define do all. So when you type in all, then the name of the model, it will display all objects that are of the same type as the model. For that, we first need to import the storage object. So I'm going to import that. Import from models, import storage. Then to get all the objects from the file storage, we type in storage all. And this will return the list of objects. But what we want is a specific object type. So first I'm going to say args. Then the next thing is we are going to say objects equal storage. So we get the list of object. Then we look through those lists. So for key value and object items dot we don't need the keys, so we're going to say for object values. So we just need the values, which are the object. Then I'm going to say for object in object values. Then what we're going to do, we are going to check if object class underscore underscore class underscore dot underscore equal org. So if it is equal to the type of the class we want to display, then we type in print object. So that ways we access all the objects, then we display them. I'm going to open a terminal. Then let's run the console. So when you type in all, nothing will show up because there isn't, we need to pass in some required parameters. But if you type in all base model, yeah, you will see only base model instances. The display might not be the same as from the project because we did not implement it, the str__method on our base model class. But the goal of the session is understanding how things work. Then we can even make this code a bit shorter. We can type in storage, then all. So that ways we do not need to declare an additional variable. Now the next other method is show, the show method. I want to say the show command. For example, if you type in show, then you type in base model, the name of the model class, then you type in its ID, then it will display that model. So what I want to do before that, we are going to implement, let's say, the underscore method in our base model class, so the display would make more sense. Just give me a few seconds. I'm just gonna copy and paste part of the code. Almost done. So that is this underscore method. I'm going to add it here. Then format the code, and we are ready to go. So now I'm going to close the console and start it again. So when you type in all base model, so this will display the base model class, and like that you see the attribute and all those things. Now we want to pass in the ID to a method called show model. So what we add now is a new method do show. Then we pass in the args. So when you type in the command, something like that, show the class name, then the class ID, the instance ID, the arg attribute, the arg parameter will contain a string made of the class name and the ID. So what we need to do is to split this string into half. The first item um, will be the class name and the other item will be the ID. So we are going to say commands equal arg split. We're going to split it using space separators. Then we can just say this is the class name, then the other would be the object ID. So we have the class name, then the object ID from the list that is going to be created from um, the split method call. Then what we can do is to look for an object that has this ID and the same class name. So we can still load our storage method. So if for object in storage all values, then we say if class name equal object underscore underscore class underscore underscore, then dot underscore underscore name underscore underscore equal to class name. Also, we need to check for the object ID. Then and so this condition is getting very long. So what I want to do is to say if it is different, we are going to continue to the next object. Then if the class name correspond, we can type in object ID equal object dot ID. So if that is different from the object ID, we continue also. But if not, uh, if we found a match, we can display the object, then stop the loop. Now let's test this function. I'm going to uh, close the console. We do need to add a quit command, but we're gonna do that just after this. So let's start the console again. Now let's show the instance of all base models. So we have here base models, the instances. Let's create other base models, base model. Then let's create an instance of the user model. Create, what else? We can create a states model instance. Create another users instance. Then when you type in all user, this will display the instance of all users. Now, what we want is to display a particular user. So I'm going to copy the ID of one of these users, then say show user, then we pass in the ID. And what you see here, we can see that when you type in the user, it's not very clear, but here it is the command. When you type in show user with the ID, we see that there is a single user displayed in the console. So that's what this function does. We are at the 40-minute limit, so let's start the session, restart the session.